Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. I recently did a first look videos on Aang at the Crossroads, saying that I could definitely see this guy performing in cEDH, and a lot of you guys didn't see it. So I figured, hey, I'd take some time, come up with a deck list, get it down, and then show it off to you guys. I have gotten this to a consistent turn 4, and it is doing exactly what I expected it to do. So today we're going to talk about Aang in cEDH. We're going to talk about the pros, the combos, and why we would run this guy versus anybody else. But before we do that, click on that whatnot link, claim your free $15, get 10% off all of your Tolarian Library proxies, and now let's get it. I'm now sponsored with Baron of Dice. This means you guys can get 5% off whenever you guys use the code DT4D or click the link in the description down below. I'm a huge fan of the awesome art on their deck boxes and just the way they look in general, and you can pair up those awesome deck boxes with high quality playmats that match those deck boxes. Thank you, Baron of Dice, for sponsoring this channel. Before we get into the pros, let's read Aang. Aang is a 5 CMC creature, 2 generic, 1 green, 1 white, and 1 blue. He has flying, and whenever he enters the battlefield, we get a look at the top 5 cards of our library, put a creature card with 4 CMC or less directly onto the battlefield. And then whenever a creature leaves the battlefield at end step, we get to transform this guy, and then he's going to get flying, vigilance, and he gives all of our land creatures vigilance. That's not important. We are focused on the front side. Now let's talk about the pros. The main pro is this guy is using instant speed win lines. That means he can win immediately and independent of the stack. We don't have to cast any spells to win the game once we get our key pieces on the battlefield, which is a huge draw in cEDH. If you can win the game without casting spells, not only does that protect you from all of the counter magic, additionally, it's going to protect you from removal because, again, we're winning at instant speed. Everybody's been at a point whenever they try to remove an important card that Sisei's trying to use to combo off with, and then they just put another activation on the stack. In this deck, we're using primarily Emil combos that blink our creatures, and that is going to kind of be the same scenario. If ever they're trying to remove one of our creatures, we can easily blink it and just try to win over top of their interaction. Extremely powerful in cEDH, and again, we're able to do this at instant speed and without casting spells, so that's 2 positives for this commander already. Another thing that I've noticed is this deck just naturally feeds Cradle. You cast your commander, you get another creature onto the battlefield, and we need at least 4 creatures to combo off with Cradle, so that is very, very noticeable. I'm not having to jam creatures onto the battlefield just to get that 4 creature minimum. Another pro is this is going to be primarily a creature combo deck, and because of that, it's just going to be a little bit more resilient whenever we're talking about a cEDH meta that likes to interact on the stack. Everybody likes to stop the thing before it resolves, but this deck kind of, skips the stack and additionally then combos off with creatures, and the removal for creatures is few and far between because you're just trying to snipe 1 or 2 pieces here and there. Another pro is our Emil combos are just super layered. You're not always having to grab Derevi to combo with Emil. There's a plethora of different ways to do that, and they all kind of synergize with the deck and fit seamlessly in there. The combo cards synergize with the deck without having any of the other pieces, and then once you get all of the other pieces, you can finally combo off. So it's kind of like you're constantly trying to assemble this winning line. It kind of reminds me of Tayam in a way. Whichever way you're closest to, you try to find the other pieces, and sometimes that's not always Derevi, which is definitely a plus here. This deck is also just on a ton of clones. It has to do with the strategy. We're on a lot of clones, and because of that, this is just going to add a little bit of flexibility to the deck. Everybody's playing strong creatures in cEDH, so cloning something like an Atraxa or even an Atali is going to be very, very strong. The last point is asymmetrical stacks. Since this is one of those decks that can win the game without ever casting a spell, this means rule of law is on the table. Now, I didn't take a heavy stacks approach whenever it came to my deck, but you definitely could. Remember, we don't have to cast spells to win the game. This means we can limit all of our opponents to casting 1 spell per turn, and that just makes it a headache for them to win the game. It also just slows down those turbo decks, which is going to be the main issue whenever you're playing a mid-range deck in general. Whenever your deck's trying to do its thing turn 4, you have to stop those decks from winning out turn 2 and turn 3, right? And this deck is going to be very efficient at that with the stacks pieces we included. Now, before we talk about the combos and the winning lines, I want to talk about how this deck is going to play out and what you're trying to do whenever you're playing this deck. You want to ramp in the early game, then you want to get a doubling effect on the battlefield, something that doubles Aang's ETB, and then from that, it's cast Aang as soon as possible. The reason we want a doubling effect is because we're digging 5 cards deep per ETB, right? So if we're able to dig 10 cards deep per ETB, your odds of hitting a clone are very, very strong, and then additionally, with with the other ETB, you're looking for either another clone or your combo piece. So having a doubling effect is that thing that really pushes this deck through and really speeds it up, because now you're able to grab Emil into another clone and then search for your Derevi, and once you find your Derevi, you're able to combo off. And that's kind of why this deck is so strong. It just digs so deep. Whenever you're digging 10 cards per ETB and getting 2 creatures, it's absolutely insane. And remember, you're completely dodging the stack while this is happening. That's another thing that I will say is super strong. If you guys have ever just directly put a Grand Abolisher into play without casting it, it directly shuts down a table so fast and really just protects your win. And that's another thing that this commander can do very good. Now let's get onto the win lines with this commander. Now the first ones are Derevi and Emil with Gaia's Cradle. What happens here is we have Emil. It's a 4 CMC creature that says we can pay 3 to exile another target creature you control, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. And then Derevi says whenever it enters the battlefield or a creature deals combat damage, we get to untap target permanent. So we blink Derevi, untap Gaia's Cradle. As long as Gaia's Cradle is tapping for 4 mana, this will give us infinite mana, and then once we have infinite mana, we can blink our commander an infinite amount of times, and this will put every single creature in our deck onto the battlefield, because every single creature in our deck is under 4 CMC. And then once we do that, we have a couple different ways we can kind of just go off and win the game. My favorite, my buddy Busy showed me, which is absolutely disgusting, involves White Plume Adventurer. This is a 3 CMC creature. It says whenever it enters the battlefield, you take the initiative, and then you're going to go through the Undercity. The Undercity takes 5 life from somebody. So if we're able to blink this an infinite amount of times, we can just drain the entire table. Another thing the Undercity does is it allows us to draw cards, so we can kind of draw our entire library while we're killing our opponents, which is very strong as well. And then this card's just pretty useful. It allows you to untap 1 creature every opponent's upkeep, and then if you've completed a dungeon, all creatures, but even just 1 creature is going to open up your interaction. Now the other win line is just straight up Spellseeker into Finale of Devastation for infinite. We do have to cast a spell there, but remember, there are ways to protect this, and at some point we're going to get Grand Abolisher on the battlefield. So getting Spellseeker into Finale of Devastation with Grand Abolisher on the battlefield, they're not going to have any interaction to stop that, right? So it's going to be pretty easy to get Finale of Devastation to resolve here. Another thing I wanted to mention, it's not exactly a combo, but it is something I wanted to talk about, and it's kind of what Derevi already does, is we are on the One Ring. The One Ring is a very powerful card, and whenever you pair it with Derevi, you're kind of just untapping creatures whenever you're dealing damage, and this allows you to draw a ton of cards. This is an insane value engine in the deck. If you pivot to this, you will see success, and it does just give you a lot of options whenever you're on so many tutors and everything. You're going to find what you need to find the rest of your key pieces, and it's really easy to get off in this deck because our commander has flying, then Derevi has flying, so you're at least untapping this twice, and then your commander does just throw a ton of creatures onto the battlefield. Now, what if we're not comboing off with Gaia's Cradle? We can also use Derevi, Emil, and then we can use either Bloom Tinder, Fairburrow Elder, and then the new Badgermole Cub. Badgermole Cub, if you guys don't know, it's a 2 CMC creature, and then whenever it enters the battlefield, it earthbends 1, so it turns one of your lands into a creature, and then it says whenever you tap a creature for mana, you get to add 1 additional green. This means Bloom Tinder and Fairburrow Elder will now tap for 4 mana. 4 mana is what we need to generate infinite mana whenever we have Emil and Derevi, so we just blink Derevi, get infinite mana with our Fairburrow Elder, and we go through the exact same line. And again, these are all creatures now, so we don't even have to utilize any lands. So even if we can't find our Gaia's Cradle, we can still get this line off without having any issues and without needing any kind of land tutor. I will say, since we are on a lot of clones, it is worth mentioning, with enough Badgermole Cubs, you can just straight up untap a land that's tapping for 4 mana. Let's say we have 2 Badgermole Cubs, we tap 1 land, it's going to generate 3 mana, and then if we have something like a Utopia Sprawl on that land's tapping for 4 mana, and again, once you generate 4 mana and you have Derevi or Emil on the battlefield, this deck is just able to go infinite. Now maybe we have Emil, but we don't have Derevi. This is where Cloud of Fairies comes in. Cloud of Fairies is able to enter the battlefield and untap 2 lands. So again, with Gaia's Cradle, that just generates infinite mana as long as we can tap Gaia's Cradle for 4. Another thing that's really good here is our Badgermole Cub. Badgermole Cub turns your creatures into lands, and then those lands tap for 1 additional mana. So as long as we blink Badger Mole Cub, Earthbend twice, now we have 2 lands that each tap for 2 mana. So now we blink Cloud of Fairies, and boom, you've got 4 mana. Another thing that this deck runs, again, is our doubling effects that double the ETBs, like Starfield Vocalist. Starfield Vocalist is amazing because it doubles the ETB of our commander, and then additionally, it doubles the ETB of our Cloud of Fairies. So if we're able to blink Cloud of Fairies and get 2 ETBs off of it, able to untap 2 lands and then untap 2 lands again, generating 4 mana, and then once you generate 4 mana, you cast your entire deck. Kind of, right? Food chain wins games, everybody. So this is also a food chain deck. Any commander with an ETB can be a food chain deck. And this deck is no different. Food chain allows you to exile a creature and add mana to your mana pool equal to that creature's mana cost +1. So whenever you have Mist Hollow Griffin, a 4 CMC creature that you can cast from exile, you can cast it an infinite amount of times, netting 1 mana each time. And because of that, you're able to generate infinite blue and then infinite green and then infinite white. And then you cast your commander an infinite amount of times. And then you're able to go into the other win lines. Another one that I'm pretty fond of in this deck is Preston the Vanisher and Felidar Guardian. Now the reason I like this is because both of the cards are pretty good in the deck, and then whenever you combine them, you get infinite ETBs. How this works is Preston the Vanisher says whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't cast, you get to create a copy of that commander or a copy of that creature that's a 0/1 white illusion. And then Felidar Guardian says whenever it enters the battlefield, you get to exile another creature and then return it to the battlefield. So if we have Preston on the battlefield and we get into Felidar Guardian with our commander, he enters the battlefield. Since we didn't cast it, we get a token copy of it, and then the token copy blinks Felidar Guardian, while Felidar Guardian blinks our commander, and then that's going to put every creature from our library onto the battlefield, kind of netting us the win, and then we kind of just transition into our other win lines, which is super simple to do. Now let's talk about some individual cards that have just been doing amazing for me. Sylvan Library has been doing pretty good for me. Sylvan Library allows you to look at the top 3 cards of your library at your draw step, and then you can either draw all of them for 8 life, 2 of them for 4 life, or just 1 of them and then you put the other 2 on top. What this allows you to do is it kind of allows you to manipulate the top of your library, and you'll know whatever you're getting off of your commander sometimes. So if you see Felidar Guardian or a combo piece, you can put that on top, then you cast your commander, then that creature goes directly onto the battlefield and you don't have to interact with the stack. So they don't have any way to counter the spell that you're getting off of your commander. Another card that I really like in this deck is Survival of the Fittest. We are on a ton of clones, and while clones are super flexible, sometimes you don't want to spend 4 CMC for a clone. So you're able to discard your clones to tutor up your combo pieces, and Survival of the Fittest just makes a lot of sense here. Last but not least, I want to talk about Philia. Busy put me onto this one, and I'm happy he did. This card's actually kind of crazy. Sometimes you end up having an explosive turn. You've got your doubler, you've got your commander on the battlefield, but you just end up, whiffing. Sometimes you just don't get there. So having Philia being able to attack, exile our commander, and then go off in the instep is absolutely insane. Remember, you only need to blink your commander once you go ahead and have that explosive turn with the doubler. So just having Ophelia to do that, and then the deck is able to win at instant speed during your instep, is incredibly useful, and it has come in handy just having a way to blink your commander. Ephemerate kind of does the same thing here, right? If you cast a clone, the clone dies, that's a creature leaving the battlefield, and your commander is going to flip over into its useless side. So once you have done that, you need to find a way to flip him back over, whether it's blinking him with a meal or something like that. I found Ephemerate is pretty good because it allows you to push on your turn, you can blink your commander, and then if that commander does end up flipping, it's going to rebound on your other turn and flip him back over so you can try next turn. So Ephemerate, Ophelia, just really good to flip him back over if he does kind of get stuck on the other side. But again, this deck has been surprisingly, consistent for me. And if you guys go into the deck list, you guys try it out for yourself, you'll see that this does have merit, and this does just feel pretty disgusting once you get the synergies off. I'm going to link my list in the description down below, and as a challenge to Busy, he built it as well because he thought it could be pretty cool, and I'm going to put his list in the description down below as well. If you guys have any questions about the deck or what we're trying to do or why this card's in there and why not, I'm open to discussion. But let's keep it positive and constructive down there. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.